Welcome back to From the Bookshelf for another book club episode. We are once again back at the City of Bones, and today we'll be going through chapters 14 and 15. So, as always, before we get started, don't forget to like, comment this video, as well as checking out some of the prior ones in this series. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel so you can get notified for all the latest videos in the book club series, as well as my weekly downloads and anything new in the future that I have coming out. So let's get started with chapter 14, the Hotel du Mort. So we're going to start on page 253. So this particular thing has to do with, in a prior episode, we talked about the key that Jace had that opened the Institute doors, where really we see that Shadowhunters don't really need a key, that the Shadowhunter blood just opens the doors for them. So we kind of see this here, that Jace and Clary are going to a church, just a regular church, to get weapons to fight with as they go to rescue Simon. Jace says this, in the name of the Clave, he said, I ask entry to this holy place. In the name of the battle that never ends, I ask the use of your weapons, and in the name of the angel Raziel, I ask your blessing on my mission against the darkness. And he's able to, get in and get to the weapons that are there at that church. So if he's able to get in here at just a regular church that has Shadowhunter weapons at it, why isn't he able to just get into the Institute? Why is that key necessary? It's not really a big deal. I just kind of find that like a continuity issue. So let's move on to page 257. So in this part, we're looking at the hotel that the vampires live in. And it says they found the hotel finally after an hour of looking on a side street off 116th. They walked past it twice, thinking it was just another abandoned apartment building, before Clary saw the sign. So I almost feel like it should be obvious to them that if the vampires are living there, that it's going to be an abandoned building, because the vampires wouldn't want mundanes coming in and out of the building at any time. So I almost feel like their lair would have to be an abandoned building. So it seems kind of odd that Jace wouldn't come to that conclusion himself. Why would he assume that it was a building that would be open to the regular public? I don't know, I just find that kind of weird that he wouldn't just assume that. Anyway, let's move on to page 259. So in this, it's just kind of a weird little tidbit of information. So they are looking for a way to get into the hotel, and this is how the alley is kind of described. So this is kind of how the alleyway is described. It was narrow, choked with garbage, moldy cardboard boxes, empty glass bottles, shredded plastic, scattered things that Clary thought at first were toothpicks, but up close looked like bones, Jace said flatly. Dog bones, cat bones. Don't look too closely. Going through vampires' trash is rarely a pretty picture. So here we are on the actual streets in New York City. Not hidden away, not in a room, not inside the building, on the actual street, outside the building. It's just littered with bones. Even if the building was abandoned, don't you think that would be just a little bit odd and out of place and suspicious? Don't you think finding bones out on the street would be something that would bring the mundane cops? Just an interesting thing, because people I know who are in law enforcement and stuff, if they saw bones outside of a building, just scattered around amongst the garbage, they'd probably be going in with the SWAT team. So it seems a little careless for them to be leaving bones outside of their lair like that. I mean, right? You agree? Disagree? Let me know. Let's move on to page 265. So here we have Jason Clary talking to this boy outside of the hotel. And this is something that is going to come up. This is something that's going to be important at a later point, but let me read this to you so you have this in your mind for when we get to that spot later. The other boy's face was pale. You go in there and do for your friend what I could not do for my brother. So here they are talking to this boy, and he's telling them, go into the hotel and save your friend. All right, keep that in mind. That this boy, Raphael, as he tells them to go inside and save their friend. Okay? You got that? Okay, so we're going to move on to page 269. You keep this in mind for later, okay? Keep this in mind. We're going to go on to 269 for right now. So they're going through the hotel, and Raphael has followed them inside. And Clary turns around, and Raphael, he was gone. No marks in the dust showing where he might have walked or been dragged. She reached for Jace reflexively, but he was already moving, running towards the gaping arch in the far wall and the shadows beyond. So Clary's thought is, oh, he's gone. He must have either walked off or been dragged off, but there's no indication of anything like that in the dust and the dirt that's on the ground. So it's just kind of like foreshadowing what we're going to find out pretty soon. Like, why did he just disappear without a trace? Why is there no trace when the floor is literally covered in dust and Clary and Jace are leaving tracks? Why isn't Raphael leaving tracks as he disappears? Think about it. Okay? Let's go to 270. So we have two things I'd like to talk about on this page. So at the top, we see this. So Jace sees Raphael as he comes back, and Raphael turned, eyes widening inquisitively, and Jace threw his knife. So here's where we see that Raphael isn't just a mundane boy, he's actually a vampire, and Jace's first thought is to attack him, like throwing a knife at him, trying to like kill him. Like, I get he's a vampire, but he hasn't really done anything wrong. He hasn't, killed anyone or violated the accords of any kind. So why is Jace just attacking him out of nowhere for no reason? It just seems strange that in this situation that's Jace's first response, to attack, even though Raphael technically hasn't done anything to warrant an attack. Like, vampires aren't the enemy overall. They're not always evil or always bad, so why is he just attacking him? I really don't know. So if you have any thoughts, again, let me know. So at the bottom of page 270, Raphael is kind of asking when he figured out that he was a vampire, and Jace says this in response. I guessed in the alley, Jace said, but I figured you'd get us inside the hotel and then turn on us. Once we'd trespassed, we'd have been out of protection of the Covenant. Fair game. When you didn't, I thought I might have been wrong. So this is where we go back to what I was saying on page 265. So, Jace is saying that they trespassed, and the vampires will, in a moment when they meet up with them, also say that they trespassed. They broke the Covenant. They're there illegally. They can't do anything, and the vampires can attack them, and it's okay because they've broken the law first. But, so Raphael is Camille, who is the head vampire of this clan, is away, and Raphael, as her second in command, is in charge. He is literally the leader of the vampires. So, on the previous page, 265, we were talking about, he literally tells them to go into the building. I mean, isn't that him giving them permission to go inside the hotel? So if he gave them permission, how are they trespassing? I have always had an issue with this because he literally gives them permission. He is the head of the vampire clan as of right now. Like, Camille will come in a later book, but as of right now, he's in charge and the leader of this clan. So if he tells them they can go inside, then how are they trespassing? Isn't it like by definition, permission given means you're not trespassing. So why is it such a hard thing for them to like understand, especially since Raphael is standing there and he's the one who said you can go inside? So if he tells them they can go inside, why is he so insistent that they're trespassing and they're there illegally? They didn't break the law. They went inside with his expressed consent. So they didn't break the law. They didn't do anything illegal by entering. So why is there this big issue that they did? Like, I mean, actually think about that. When you go back, and I made a point to point it out, he tells them to go inside. To go inside and save their friend. Go inside and save your friend. So he told them to go inside and save their friend. So why all of a sudden now is Raphael saying that they're trespassing and that they're against the accords and they've broken the covenant? They haven't. So that's always been an issue for me whenever I read these books, because it's clearly they did not do anything wrong as is written here, as you can see. All right, so we're going to move on to page 274. So this is where they're saying that the rat is their friend and their friend Simon, a mundane, and not a vampire that they believed it to be. So so basically the vampires stole Simon out of the backpack that the Shadowhunters were carrying. And he says, man, I thought he was Zeke. I wondered why he was copying such an attitude. And he also says, he's already bitten me 5 times. Like, my thought here is, why would a vampire think that a Shadowhunter would abduct your vampire friend who'd been turned into a rat? Like, it just sounds strange. Like, the Shadowhunters wouldn't even cared enough to abduct your friend the vampire, let alone your friend the vampire who turned himself into a rat. Why would you assume that? That's just a weird thing to assume, because that's just a weird thing for a vampire to... Because that's just a weird thing for a Shadowhunter to do in general. I don't know. That's just me. So let's skip ahead to page 276. This kind of goes back to the whole trespassing thing. So they're talking about Simon, the rat, and they're saying he's there, you know, illegally, and he's not allowed to be there, and they're allowed to, you know, kill him and stuff like that because he trespassed. And Clary says, you brought him here. He didn't trespass. Technicalities, said Raphael, grinning at her despite the knife at his throat. Besides, you think we do not hear the rumors? The news that is running through Downworld like blood through veins. Valentine is back. There will be no accords and no covenants soon enough. So he's saying, technicalities. Do we need to relearn the definition of, like, permission and trespassing? Like, if you give somebody permission, they're no longer trespassing. And in Simon's case, if you literally bring them into your home, they're not trespassing. So it's not a technicality, it's a fact. He's not trespassing. You brought him there. And then we actually see this part where it makes you wonder if this is really about them trespassing, or if it's about, you know, the vampires thinking, oh, well, now that Valentine's back, now that Valentine's back, the Accords and Shadowhunters rules are going to go out the window because he's going to, you know, take over, so it doesn't matter anyway. Like, he literally says there will be no Accords and no covenant soon enough. So he's basically saying, well, none of those rules matter because, well, they're not going to matter when Valentine runs the world. So why should we follow them now? So is this about trespassing, or is it about who Raphael thinks is going to win a war that hasn't happened yet? I don't know. But it's an interesting thing to say in that particular context. Okay, let's move on to page 280. So I found this just like an interesting thing. Clary is here talking about how she's never really fought anybody or ever learned to really hit anyone. It says, so she says this after having stabbed a vampire. She'd never hit anyone, let alone stabbed them. She'd even skipped gym class the day they'd learned how to ward off muggers with ordinary objects like car keys and pencils. She pulled the knife free, raised it in a shaking hand. So here she's thinking to herself, she doesn't like to fight, which, is understandable, but she didn't even go to gym class the day they learned how to defend themselves. She lives in New York City, and she's a 15-year-old tiny little girl. I say tiny because, at 5'2", she's tiny. A 15-year-old girl in New York City, and she doesn't want to learn how to fight. Not necessarily fight, but defend herself. Like, that seems very odd. Like, why wouldn't she want to learn to defend herself? I mean, you'd think her mother would want her to learn how to defend herself. I don't know. It's just, especially since her Shadowhunter blood, it's like, it would almost be like she'd want to learn that because it's like a part of who she is, especially as we see her later on training as a Shadowhunter, that she's like exceptionally good at it, just in the fact that she is a Shadowhunter. It's just kind of like natural to her. So it just seems strange. But anyway, let's move on to chapter 15, High and Dry. So we're going to start on page 283. So we have this moment where the Clary and Jace are fighting off the vampires and trying to get out of the hotel. And Simon, who's still a rat, so she yanked her arm free and dashed after Simon, who was crouched in the folds of the drapes, chittering excitedly and pawing at them. Belatedly realizing what he was trying to tell her, she yanked the drapes aside. They were slimy with mold, but behind them was a door. So I just find this interesting that Simon automatically knows that there's this door there. So I don't know how he knows that the door's there. It's just weird that he's able to find it, because if you read that last part, it says they were slimy with mold, which means there's probably not getting used. It's probably just sitting and like rotting and getting gross and disgusting. So how does he know it's there? He just like simply finds it out of nowhere, and I just find it strange that he's been there for like maybe an hour and he just knows that this door's there. I mean, unless they used it to get in to the hotel. But like I said, just the fact that this door is so unused that there's mold festering around the drapes covering it, just something to think about. So we're gonna move on to page 287. So so this is kind of a spoiler right here. So for anyone who hasn't read anything further than this, especially City of Heavenly Fire, which is the last book in the series, then you might want to like scroll ahead just a little bit to the next section, just so you don't get spoiled on some of what's coming up, because this is just, I find, a super interesting thing. So Clary has this ability where she can, in a sense, create new runes. She doesn't necessarily create them. She kind of like sees them in her head, and it's like because of the angels. Like the angels are kind of like, she has so Clary has angel blood, and it gives her the ability to see runes that shadow hunters don't necessarily know about. They're real runes, real angelic runes, but they weren't given to shadow hunters in the Grey Book. So she's able to see these and bring them out to use for the shadow hunters. So so we see this. Something began to take shape in the back of Clary's mind. A rune danced against the back of her eyelids. Two downward triangles joined by a single bar. A rune like a pair of wings. So this rune, it's the first rune that's not in the Grey Book that the Shadowhunters have, that has all of the runes they use in it. It's the first one that she sees in her mind to create. But this is actually one that we don't actually see used until, I believe, the last book in the Mortal Instruments, which is City of Heavenly Fire. And this is the Heavenly Fire rune. which does so much. And it's just interesting that this is the first room that she sees in her head, even though it's like one of the ones she doesn't really use till like super later in the book. So it's just kind of cool that you see this, but you don't really know what it is at this point. And you don't really know what it is until you've like gone back and reread it a few times, because I didn't realize this till at least the third or fourth reading. So I think that's really cool how, as I said before, just everything is so interconnected within the series. So let's move on to page 291. So at this point, Clary, Jace, and Simon, the still rat, are on a vampire bicycle, which can fly. So they're flying across New York. And Simon is kind of like freaking out. He scratched her again, then pointed an urgent paw toward the waterfront of Brooklyn, raising up on their left. And then moving down, Clary says, "Yes, very pretty," Clary said, closing her eyes again. "Nice sunrise." Jace went rigid all over, as if he'd been shot. Sunrise. So sunrise causes the demon energies in the bike to stop working, and the bike like crash lands. But my question is, how does Simon know that this is going to happen? He's like mundane. He doesn't know anything about the shadow world. So how does he realize that the sunrise is going to cause the bike to stop working? If anyone has any thoughts or theories, I'd love to hear them. But let's move on to our last point in this episode, which is on 293. So we have this, so Jace gets up after the crash of the motorcycle and is starting to go towards Clary. And this is what happens. So, and there was Jace, getting painfully to his feet. He started to hurry toward her, then slowed as he approached. The sleeve of his shirt had been torn away, and there was a long bloody graze along his left arm. His face, under the cap of dark gold curls, matted with sweat, dust, and blood, was white as a sheet. She wondered why he looked like that. Was her torn-off leg lying across the parking lot somewhere in a pool of blood? Which, you know, the fact that Clary automatically thinks that she's been mangled beyond repair is hilarious, and just in general. But what he's actually responding to is, I think, Simon, who has become human again. He's no longer a rat. So why does Jace have this, like, such a disturbing reaction to seeing Simon? And he knows Simon is there. They literally just went to the hotel to rescue him from the vampires. He was on the bike with them. So why is he so, like, shocked, surprised, and disturbed by the fact that Simon has once again turned back into a human? I really don't know what the cause of this is. I mean, obviously it was because of Simon, but why, though? I honestly don't know. So, again, I'm going to ask, because I've been a lot throughout this book, or a lot throughout this episode. Comment, let me know what you think that means. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that particular section. So as I said, that's it for this video. We will be continuing on. We have a few more videos left for this book. So thanks again for coming by and hearing what I had to say. Go ahead and leave your comments down below on your own thoughts and opinions on this section of the book. And if I missed anything, let me know and we can talk about it. So thanks again for coming by, and I'll see you next time.